welcome to the Goal Podcast, news and commentary from Gun Owners Action League, your leading voice for the Massachusetts gun owner.
I'm Garrett, here with Jeff. What's up, man?
What's happening?
Not a lot.
You got a new blaster to talk about.
I did. Finally came in the mail. I'm very excited. Picked it up yesterday. My Mossberg over under 20 gauge. Very exciting. I know it's not very exciting to a lot of people, but it's pretty exciting to me. So
it's always exciting. Finally got
a dedicated bird gun, which is nice.
Yeah, but I heard that you had a little delay with the background check. How is that supposed to happen?
Every single time. It's ridiculous. I've been buying guns for how long now? I don't have a criminal history, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. I always get delayed. So I went through, as you know, we talked about on the show here, I went through the process of getting a U-Pen 3-4 years ago, whatever it was. And even still, I get a delay, but it's a delay typically for a few minutes. It's not like the 3-day Brady delay. It doesn't take forever like it used to. So yeah, no, I went, John transferred it for me. Thank you, John. It was a delay, and like 20-25 minutes later, they called back and said, hey, it's good to go. God damn it. So I'd sit around the office for that time, hanging my head in shame.
Yeah, John and I were hunting that morning, and he said, I got to leave. I got to go, do the transfer for Garrett. Got to run this, knock a couple things off the list. And then he was coming back for the afternoon. But happy to report, John's on the boards.
He is on the boards. Good job, John.
Yeah, Monday morning we went out. John jumped up in his ladder stand. I went to a different part of the property and hopped in my blind. And around 8:30, I get the text message, buck down.
Nice. So, very, very nice. I saw the picture. Very nice.
Great buck. John put a great shot on him, too. It's like trailed him for maybe, 30 feet, 50 feet.
Just enough for her to realize what happened and lay down.
Yep, but congratulations to John.
Nice. He's on the boards for the year.
Plenty of nice meals for the family coming up.
Cool. So tonight we have a special guest that's going to join us in a little bit. Rob Beckman is running for the NRA Board, so he'll be joining us a little bit later on. In the meantime, though, we do have some news and updates.
So coming out of our friendly neighbors to the west, there is a New York law that has now been signed into effect that mandates firearms confiscation. It mandates police to seize firearms without any charges being filed or warrants issued. Under this new law, if police respond to a domestic violence or domestic disturbance call, the police shall confiscate any and all firearms, including antiques, muzzleloaders, stun guns, etc., if the person claiming to be the victim also claims that they have been threatened or feel threatened by the person being accused, or if any of the responding officers have a reasonable belief that removing the firearms will prevent risk of further violence or threat.
Oh, for the love of God, come on.
So they're also mandated to confiscate any licenses held by the person being accused. There's then a 5-day minimum waiting period. They casually didn't put in a maximum.
Of course not. Forever.
But if there is no active court order, such as a protection order or ERPO, red flag order, preventing the owner from having the firearms or licenses, and there are no pending criminal charges or convictions that would disqualify the owner, and once it's confirmed in writing that there's no legal reason stopping the owner from possession, the court or licensing authority or whoever has custody of the firearms can return the firearms to the owner unless they've already been otherwise legally disposed of.
Lovely. So the default position is take your guns away, and then you have to jump through all the hoops to get them back.
No charges, no warrant, nothing.
It's literally take the guns first, ask questions later.
Word of mouth. Someone either says that they feel threatened, or if an officer believes that confiscation will, quote unquote, prevent risk of further violence or threat.
Yeah, because a cop is going to say, oh, no, I wasn't worried. Of course not. I wasn't worried about leaving the guns there. So that's a default position. Of course, they're going to say that it would, in their opinion, reduce the risk. So,
and amazingly, you have to get the court order in writing to get them back, but you don't need a court order in writing to confiscate them in the first place.
No, you just take them.
But under New York state law, it allows the state to destroy firearms if they feel it poses a public safety risk or is determined to be a nuisance firearm. There is no provision in the new law that outlines any penalty, civil or criminal liability for false statements or for an officer to use any level of discretion. This is a shall confiscate order. If someone decides they're upset and they want to tell the police they feel threatened, no warrant, no due process, no options. Your civil rights and your property are gone, and best of luck to you and your financial ability to recover them.
Just take them all. Take the entire collection and dispose of them, according to Penal Law 400, whatever the hell that is. Unbelievable. That's literally, take the guns now and ask questions later.
Of course.
That's not how civil rights is supposed to work.
Now, I wonder where all the due process protesters are on that one.
Yeah.
I wonder where they land.
Crickets.
But moving from the state to the federal level, this is actually going from bad to good. Dare I say better? Maybe
better. I'm reservedly better. Yeah, very cautiously optimistic.
The Department of Justice is claiming that magazine bans are unconstitutional. So the DOJ has taken a major step that could have national implications for gun laws. In a recent court filing in U.S. v. Juan Peterson, the Department of Justice has asked the D.C. Court of Appeals to erase Peterson's conviction for possession of a large-capacity ammunition magazine, meaning that the magazine held more than 10 rounds. The government now says the D.C. law banning these magazines is, in fact, unconstitutional under the Second Amendment, which is a direct and sharp reversal from an earlier position when the DOJ had previously defended those kinds of bans in court.
Yeah.
Amazing how administrations change.
Isn't that weird? Votes have consequences. For background, Juan Peterson was convicted in 2023 on a number of gun and drug charges, including having one of these magazines. He appealed, arguing that the magazine ban violated his constitutional right to bear arms. The Department of Justice has now agreed with him, saying the ban cannot stand up to the level of scrutiny required per NYSRPA v. Bruin decision, the Supreme Court. The Justice Department also said it will stop prosecuting people under that law, and it's asking the court to officially throw out Peterson's conviction for that charge. Importantly, this request does not affect his other convictions, only the ones tied to the magazine bans.
Yeah, what makes this motion so important is that it reflects a major shift in how the federal government interprets the Second Amendment by saying that a total ban on large capacity magazines is unconstitutional. The DOJ has taken the stance that could realistically ripple beyond D.C. Similar laws exist in several states.
Yeah.
And the new position could encourage courts to strike down those restrictions as well, since it suggests the right to keep and bear arms includes not just owning the firearm itself, but also the standard equipment that makes it functional for use.
Yeah, yeah.
So in short, it's not really about one man's conviction. It's about an official federal policy changing course on a key Second Amendment question.
Yeah.
If the view takes hold in the courts, it could reshape how gun rights are interpreted across the country. It could redefine what kind of firearm restrictions are considered constitutional. It also puts it squarely in the face of the U.S. Supreme Court, which denied cert in Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island, which was exactly about magazine capacity restrictions. Yep. Which the court declined to weigh in on when it denied certiorari. Perhaps the DOJ Civil Rights Division might prod Kavanaugh's timeline a little bit to the shorter side when he said the court may take up certain cases in another year or two. But currently there are 14 states, and I say states kind of loosely because one is D.C., that have some form of restriction on magazine capacity. And that current list is California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington State, and the District of Columbia. Mix and match most, 10-round magazines, 50 all over the place.
You'll recognize a lot of those states as the basically the suck states, right? The ones that never met a gun restriction that they don't like. Yeah. Those are all on the list. California, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Jersey, New York, etc. This only, like you kind of alluded to, this only does affect DC and its interesting status as a federal city. So it doesn't have any immediate bearing on the states or state law or anything, but it does set up a conflict. It sets up a conflict and potentially and a question for the Supreme Court to answer in the future. So Massachusetts has responded in Hanlon, and you're not going to believe what their rationale is.
All right, so here's what's happening. We'll do a quick summary in case someone is unaware of how we are in this position that we are.
Yep.
The case of Hanlon v. Campbell is one of the, I would argue, the biggest legal showdowns yet over Massachusetts sweeping 2024 gun control law, the so-called Act Modernizing Firearms Laws, Chapter 135. Yep. This law bans an enormous range of common semi-automatic firearms. It includes rifles, shotguns, handguns, by labeling them, put the bunny quotes around this, assault style.
Yeah, the new terminology, assault style.
Doesn't actually mean anything technical. It's not an objective definition. Right. There's really nothing around it. It's political branding. These are the same kinds of firearms millions of people use for self-defense, for sport, for hunting, for all sorts of reasons.
Right. If you give it a name that means nothing, then it can mean anything.
Exactly. Now, we at Goal, along with the plaintiffs, including ordinary citizens, there's a gun store involved, and the National Rifle Association, argue that the firearms ban is unconstitutional on its face. So in the scope of challenging Chapter 135, this is really tackling the gun bans.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has already made it clear in Heller, in McDonald, in Bruin, that governments can't ban entire classes of firearms that are in common use for lawful purposes. That's exactly what Massachusetts did with Chapter 135. They didn't just restrict ownership. They made it a crime to possess, sell, or even transfer some of the most popular firearms in America. So this is a straight up, no questions asked violation of the Second Amendment. Not only that, but the law is equally so vague and open-ended, like you said, if it means nothing, it means everything, that it's impossible to know what's banned and what isn't. So state agencies, law enforcement, even the folks tasked with coming up, with the naughty list, can't really make heads or tails out of it in a way that folks without special esoteric insight can understand.
You got to be a member of the priesthood. The state's definition of, quote, assault style includes everything from folding stocks, threaded barrels, and it allows the bureaucrats to update this secret roster of banned guns whenever they feel like it. And Jim talked about this when we had him on several episodes ago. So they can literally just add a gun whenever they feel like it. And if you own it already, too bad. It's an assault style weapon. It means that a gun that's perfectly legal today can absolutely be illegal tomorrow without any warning. Nobody, not even licensed dealers, can know for sure. This is exactly the kind of government overreach the Constitution was written to prevent. There's no historical tradition of banning firearms in common use. The Supreme Court's decisions, especially Bruin, make it clear that states have to show a textual, historical, and traditional basis for any modern gun restriction. Massachusetts can't do that, so instead, you're trying to redefine words, shifting the goalpost around and inventing new linguistic categories to keep banning whatever it wants. So they make up new things like assault style.
Now, here's where things get, I kid you not, truly absurd. The state's response. So you file a lawsuit and the state, the defendant, gets to write a legal response. When Massachusetts filed its official answer to our lawsuit, they're not even trying to argue the ban fits within the Second Amendment. Instead, the Attorney General's office went full bureaucratic spin city dodge mode, dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. They denied practically every single factual statement in the complaint, even ones that are unquestionably objectively true, like the fact that AR pattern firearms are commonly owned, estimated 20 plus million in circulation. They refuse to admit these firearms are in common use, even though it's a well-documented fact recognized by multiple courts, even anti-firearms courts. Then, rather than defending the law on the merits, the state argued that it's immune from lawsuits altogether. Yeah. It's like, you read it right. Their very first affirmative defense in this case says they claim sovereign immunity, basically saying that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts can't even be sued in federal court for violating the Constitution. No need for interpretive analysis. They're just directly saying we're the government and we don't have to follow the rules.
Like, you can't sue us because we're the government.
They're saying the quiet part out loud. It's 100% textbook example of tyranny. So we can expect all the protest folks to be out again with their "No King" signage, right?
Yeah. I think they're probably going to skip this one because it's evil guns. It's completely outrageous. The 11th Amendment protects states from certain damage claims, but it does not give them immunity from constitutional accountability. The Supreme Court settled that more than 100 years ago in Ex parte Young. State officials can't enforce unconstitutional laws. Yet Massachusetts is pretending that, it's above that. They're saying the Constitution applies to citizens, not the government. We're the government. We can do anything we want.
So as an aside, and just kind of like as a matter of education, so the 11th Amendment that the state is claiming protects them from this lawsuit says that the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. So the plain English version means you generally can't sue a state for financial damages in federal court if you're from another state or a foreign country. This was passed in 1795 to kind of stop outsiders from dragging states into court over debts. It was never meant to let governments just ignore the Constitution. The Supreme Court made it should be very clear in Ex parte Young, which is a case going back to 1908. In that case, a state attorney general tried to enforce an unconstitutional law and claimed immunity under the 11th Amendment. The court outright rejected the argument, ruling that when a state official enforces a law that violates the Constitution, they stopped acting as a legitimate representative of the state. And they are open to being sued in federal court to stop them because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and no state official stands above it. Like this is going 1908. This question was settled. When you put it all together, the state's position is that it can pass blatantly unconstitutional laws, enforce them at gunpoint, and then hide behind immunity when or if the citizens decide to fight back. And from a constitutional standpoint, it flips the entire Bill of Rights upside down. And from the Second Amendment perspective, where we're coming from, it's not even just hypocrisy. It's an outright double middle finger to the Supreme Court, to the federal government, saying that we're going to do whatever we please. There's no alternative interpretation than to see it as the government trying to claim rights it doesn't have while trampling on the rights of the people it's supposed to serve. And let's be clear, governments don't have constitutional rights. They have constitutional limits.
That's right.
Their agencies, their law enforcement do not have rights. They have authorities. The only people in this equation who have any claim to civil rights are the citizens themselves. So the idea that Massachusetts can claim constitutional rights against its own citizens while denying those same citizens their actual constitutional rights is it's textbook tyranny.
Yeah, so I look at this stuff from the state. The response from the state has the feel of, some state lawyer going down the list and saying, okay, I'll take a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and we'll just, these are some boilerplate responses. Okay, I'm just going to, it's like having an immediate and automatic motion to dismiss, when you read there's nothing behind it. It's just like a bunch of boilerplate stuff that they throw out, and hopefully one of them will stick.
Yeah, when you read it, so there's, obviously in the original court filing, there's all the claims that the plaintiffs, were making against the state.
Yeah.
And in the state's response, they're like, number 32, denied. Number 33, denied. Number 34. Yeah. They claim so many times in that thing that our suit has so little standing, it doesn't even warrant a response from the state.
Gives you a good feeling about what they think of us.
All right, joining us remotely is Rob Beckman. So Rob is the host of the Firearms Trainer podcast. It's a weekly show dedicated to all firearms instructors, civilian, law enforcement, military sectors, not just on the business side of it, but how to be a better instructor and helping more folks be prepared for potentially having to use their firearms. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as other outlets where you get your podcast fix. And you're currently running for the board of directors for the National Rifle Association. So thank you for joining us, Rob.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a honor to be there and talk to Goal. I've been a follower for you guys for many years, and been a member for I think 2 years now because I like what you guys are doing up there in Massachusetts, and we've got to stick together, as they say.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
the state's certainly keeping us busy.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the latest view from the outside world of
What does America think of Massachusetts?
how does Massachusetts look from the outside perspective?
I go along, scratch my head between like Massachusetts and you got California. You put New York and then Illinois is in there. You sit there and it's like, why are they doing that? And then you go along and you realize that they're passing laws or doing things to feel better, but they're not actually doing anything to address the crime, which is one of those things that bothers, I think, most law-abiding gun owners because, we're law-abiding gun owners. So we're not breaking the law. So why don't you go along and worry about the other people that are breaking the law in the different ways than to go along and harass, legally armed firearm owners?
Yeah, here we're in the midst of a case where a guy who was moving to the area ended up getting had some firearms in the vehicle with him, ended up getting pulled over. He got held for over 120 days,
Yeah.
Garrett?
Well, right around 120 days.
120 days in jail, no bail, no bond on a dangerousness hearing. In the meanwhile, there was another guy, illegal possession of firearms, opened fire on the busiest highway in the state during rush hour in broad daylight, and that guy got bail. So trust me, we're scratching our heads inside the state as much as folks on the outside.
It's unbelievable here.
Yeah, I went along and listened to the Sandra, I think the guy's girlfriend, was talking with Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I was caught his podcast, and I was listening to it, and it's like, how does this make sense that you're worried about him being a flight risk when, he's a military veteran, he's got his girlfriend there, they got family in Massachusetts, all these different factors, but they go along and they give it to somebody else for it. And you see it all around. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we just had a big brawl that made national news back in July, and the lead instigator of it, or the person who did the biggest damage, he was a felon out on bail for illegal possession of a firearm, and they gave him a $4,000 bond, which he only had to come up with $400 in order to get back out on the street. And then 3 weeks later, he gets into a knockdown, drag out fight to where he was curb stomping people, and it was you go along, it's like, well, wait a minute. If you're a felon in possession of a firearm, shouldn't you have done a little bit more than pay $400 for your bond in order to get back out on the street for it? Then they really threw the book at him because he kicked somebody. They went along and gave him a $500,000 bond, and everybody was upset about that.
Well, it's a bit of an off-flavored joke that we kind of toss around every once in a while, but it almost seems like the state encourages you, like, if you're going to get in trouble, you might as well start shooting, because the worse the crime you commit, it seems the nicer the state treats you. But that's the state of the judicial system right now. But getting back to yourself, where and how were you introduced to firearms? When did they start becoming a part of your life, and when did that journey begin?
It started when I was young on my parents' farm. We just go out and shoot groundhogs. Nothing really serious. We just, it was a job to do. I went to Boy Scout summer camp and started plinking around with a little 22 before, like many people do when they go to summer camp. And it really wasn't until I got into my 30s I decided to take up hunting. Just not hunting a little bit, but hunting from a, doing it all the time as much as I can type of standpoint. And that's where I started going out. I was doing archery, muzzleloading, and shotgun at the time. Ohio was a shotgun. And I wanted to go and get over to Indiana. And Indiana required at the time that you have a permit from your state in order to carry a firearm. This was early 2000s. So I went along and it's like, okay, what qualifies for that? I mean, do I just get a permission slip, from the local police? And like, no, they want like a concealed carry permit or a firearm identification card, similar to like Illinois for it. So I got my Ohio concealed carry license, back in 2004 and was able to start hunting in Indiana. And one thing led to another, to where concealed carry in 2004 was new in Ohio. And I started asking around. I was like, how do you become an instructor? And that's when I started going along and getting my NRA certifications. Shortly after becoming an instructor, I became a NRA training counselor. So I was able to go along and teach new people how to be NRA instructors and certify from that standpoint. And then also going along and looking and seeing from a 2A advocacy standpoint what was all going on, because I saw, honest, law-abiding citizens being harassed for concealed carry, and helped out from a Ohio standpoint what could, the advocacy to change the laws in Ohio. One of the ones that, as I go along, tell people, it doesn't make any sense at all, but in 2004, when Ohio passed concealed carry, it was illegal to have a concealed firearm in your car. Let's sink in. You've got a concealed carry license and you can't carry concealed in your car. You had to be in plain sight. So what do? Throw it up on your dashboard? That doesn't do a whole lot of good to keeping it secure and or, alarming the public. But we were able to change that. We were able to change the duty retreat, as well as now you don't need to go along in Ohio and have a proactive defense. Ohio until 2019 was the only state in the union out of 50 states that you had to go along and prove that you were acted in self-defense. The other 49 states, the prosecutor had to prove that you didn't act in self-defense, but in Ohio until 2019, you had to prove that you acted in self-defense. So that was one of those things, putting the burden on the prosecutor.
That's crazy.
But it was the law, and that's where you stand up and say, wait a minute, we got to change this. And that's where you become active, not only supporting organizations that do it, but also getting your voice out there for it. The NRA's got the Institute of Legislative Action. We also have the Buckeye Firearms here in Ohio. I also went along, joined up with the Ohio Rifle and Pistol Association to help them out, because I'm just not the type of person that would sit back and say, well, I'm going to let Jeff and Garrett run with this. Just let them go. Because we've all got stuff to do, and I'm okay. If I can do something about it, I'll do what I can to help it along. There might be somebody better, yes, but if nobody else is stepping up, I'll step up and make sure that gap is filled, to make sure that kind of work gets done. And that's, quite frankly, where I've got myself in trouble with when it comes to the NRA Board of Directors, because for the past 5 years, there were a lot of people that, if they were reformist, I was passing around their petitions to get them on the ballot. If they were on the ballot and they were reformers, I was going along and making sure people realized that they were the ones that wanted to vote. And then this summer, those people paid me back by going along and saying, I think you need to be on the board also, because they need people that won't go along and just take the sideline, but will actually actively get involved. An honor to be chosen, but at the same time, it's absolutely terrifying, because it's not just your local gun club, your decision impact. I mean, I've had many people go along and say, so is this just in the state of Ohio? And I'm like, no, this is the National Rifle Association. And that means, they'll be not only, helping to decide what the NRA gets involved with as far as legislative action, judicial actions, but also, one of my focus areas, coming from the training side of things, is going along and looking and revamping the education training for the NRA. And the NRA's got great training right now. The challenge comes into, and I talk to a lot of instructors from time to time, it's not necessarily hitting the mark when it comes to what people are looking for. And what I mean by that is, there's 29 states that are constitutional carry. They don't need training, right? But we know they need training.
Of course.
So why don't we have a training program specifically targeted to constitutional carry, to get those people in there? And then maybe after they get the constitutional, they'll realize that, hey, maybe I really should take a more thorough course on firearms and how to draw and move and do those types of things for it. Or when we go along, we talk about something as devastating as like firearm death when it comes to grade schoolers. Why can't there be a public service announcement put out available to schools that the NRA produces that teaches kids, don't touch, not something the teacher's got to teach, but something that you can go along and literally play on YouTube. The parents can play it for them. They can do those types of things and have that social media presence. I mean, we're here because we know the way to reach the current audience in the United States is through podcasts, through social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all these different things to do it. And when you go along and look at the NRA has a very small footprint in that. They produce a lot of content, but it's very small compared to the amount of content that's produced every day. And quite frankly, it's a lot of gun control groups that do a lot better job with it. And that's where we've got to go along and not just say, okay, let's do something to get our name out there. No, we've got to do something to counter the every towns. We got to counter the moms that demand action to make sure that people realize that the NRA has a lot of good programs. The NRA is reforming. The NRA is not the same NRA as 2 years ago or even 10 years ago. Under Doug Hanlon made a lot of changes, and that's where I'm excited to have my name on the ballot and excited to see if I can get elected and put my efforts into making the NRA 2.0 be the organization I want to see it to be.
So, question for you. We talk about, NRA proposed programs, things like that. What is your answer to the folks that say that the NRA has a certain stigma associated to just the name? We talk about producing programs for consumption in schools, et cetera, right? Do a public safety training, things like that. I know personally that a certain circumstance was brought to public school here in Massachusetts. It's Massachusetts, so there's that. But brought to a public school all the way up through the beginning parts of the program. I'm not sure if it was exactly Eddie Eagle, but it was something along those lines. It's brought to the school, say this is the training program, this is safety for kids, et cetera. We go all the way up through the program. School's going great. This is fabulous. This is great stuff until they see the NRA watermark on the last page, and then they stop dead in their tracks and they say, no, we can't use this. What is your position on this whole thing and the idea that the NRA just by itself has a stigma in the public perception?
I can agree with you. I've had the exact same thing with their NRA's Refuse to be a Victim program, and there is a stigma. And part of that stigma, I think the NRA has not positioned itself all the time as being pro Second Amendment. And what I mean by that is they've always been there for gun owners, but they always haven't been the source of knowledge, or coming out with effective messaging when it comes to people. They've gotten tied up into some of the social issues. And that's where the NRA has got to be, and foremost, a 2A advocacy group. It's not going to turn around on day one, but that's where having a proactive stance, because you talked about schools. Yes, schools don't want anything to do with the NRA, but I would guarantee you there's probably schools that are in rural or suburban areas that if there was a good firearm safety video that they could play that would be 30 minutes to your first and second graders, something else like that, they would do it. And then you come down to the point when the next thing happens to an urban school and people are like, this is terrible. Somebody can go along and say, well, Garrett, you're the school board president. Why don't you go along and do the NRA's, program? Because you've got suburban school ABC that are 10 miles away from you, but they don't have the problems that you have. Now, see that school board president walk back from a decision like that. He'd be like, well, wait a minute, it's NRA. We can't do that. It's like, wait a minute. But they're the ones that are the knowledgeable sources for it. And you're refusing to play it. I mean, that's one of those things where I don't want us to expect the next election that he'd be drummed out as president of the school board very quickly.
Well, there's definitely I think there's some institutional inertia with how the NRA has historically conducted training. At least in my lifetime, it seems like it's there if you are willing to pursue it, but it's hard to get access to it if you're not kind of already actively looking for it. So what do you think are the more effective ways and routes that the NRA can get its messaging out that maybe they haven't tried before?
Well, social media, biggest one. You go along and look at YouTube, you look at TikTok. There are social influencers out there that are creating content. Some of them good, some not so good, some of them flat out bad. But still, they're out there creating content. NRA has no content that's out there. Now, I'm not saying that we replace their basic pistol program and put it all onto YouTube. What I'm saying is go along and be able to advertise it that way, to go along and say, if you want more information, here's a quick way to, find out what you're going to learn, from, and maybe they have social influencers talking about, but you connect them with those instructors. One of the things I'm very encouraged by what the current board has done is they're working very diligently to come out with an NRA app for it. And the one thing that'd be nice about the NRA app is, as members, you can actually find what the NRA is all involved with, between the Institute of Legislative Action, with the NRA Foundation, Friends of NRA, as well as I've suggested making sure they tie it so that you can go along and find out who your local instructors are. So once you do get interested in a gun, or you buy a new one, or want to take your skills to the next level, you can actually find it. Because more than once, I found somebody contacting me about, hey, what about this training? We're interested in it. We'd like you to come. It's like, do you realize there's somebody that's 30 miles away from you? Because there's no way to go along and see who the instructors are in your area. And again, that not only would help the NRA, it would help the public, and also would help the instructors, because a lot of instructors are, teaching for, that's their side gig, and it would help them be able to go along and reach those students and effectively train those responsible gun owners.
Right on. So, looking at where the NRA's been, where it is now, where do you think it should be? What do you think would be reasonable goals for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, the next 2 years, the number one goal that has to be accomplished is transparency. Transparency, so the members will know where their money's going, what the organization's doing. That was the biggest problem we've had over the last 10 to 15 years under the old regime, and people were constantly wondering what happened to their money. Why are we spending so much money on marketing, on legal, those type, and nobody had visibility into that. Because one of the things that's lifeblood for the NRA is membership. If we can't attract new members, we're not going to accomplish the 5 or 10 year goal. And that's got to be our number one goal over the next 2 years, is transparency. Shortly behind that, we also have to go along and look at the demographics that we're catering to for it. Because currently, NRA is made up of a whole lot of white guys, old white guys. It's not a white organization, but majority of the members are old white guys. Well, keep in mind that over the last 5 years, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, over 8 million new gun owners there have been over 8 million new gun owners. When you think about that, the NRA's lost 1 million members over the last 5 years. That's one of those things to where that should have been the other way around. And then on top of that, there's 8 million. The two largest demographics that are increasing are women and minorities. And those are two groups that, as I was going along collecting signatures for my candidacy to run for the board of directors, I would be talking to anybody and everybody that was at a gun show, that was at a Friends of NRA meeting, any of these places where I thought gun owners would be. And what I found kind of shocked me a little bit, because roughly only 10% of the people at gun shows were really NRA members, which is like, okay, you're at a gun show, so you're a gun person, you're not supporting NRA. But even worse, when you approach somebody who's a minority or who was female, most of them, I'm talking probably I got maybe a dozen or so vote or signatures for those people, because the majority of them are not, because they don't see it identifying with their values and what they need, even though we know the NRA is out there fighting for everybody's Second Amendment rights. But that's part of an image problem they have, and that's where they need to go along and look at that, because the future of the NRA is not just going along catering to one group, it's catering to everybody who can legally own a firearm, and having that force behind the name because just like we were talking about schools and how to go along and have that, headwind that we have going to some places, if we've got a cross section of society, both, the minorities as well as the majorities in the population, that will give us a lot better leverage when it comes to getting schools, when it comes to promoting legislation to the politicians, and at the same time, a better understanding and more responsible gun owners in America.
Yeah, it's a difficult political dance to do because even for us, for Gun Owners Action League, it's, we always say that the Second Amendment is not a partisan issue. It absolutely shouldn't be. But it is also hard to divorce yourself from any of that kind of political discussion, because the topic of firearms in and of itself is rather, politically polarized. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, one side always votes against you and one side always votes for you. So who do you cozy up with sometimes? But then you get, you get lumped in with all the other baggage that comes along with it. So, I mean, it's certainly probably a question that's not really, I guess, so relevant to the board of directors. But what do you see as a pathway to stay in the political arena, but to start pulling away at the partisan politics and having the NRA labeled as like a conservative organization or a Republican organization, and getting tied into all that stuff where it can truly just stay, neutral in the Second Amendment landscape?
Well, I think one thing they've got to really set their, stake in is 2A advocacy. And I say that because just in the last 6 years or so, we had, President Trump during his first term go along and support the bump stock ban. And that was one of the things where it got thrown out and the NRA really didn't fight against it for it. That's one of those things to where we should have been, pushing. And Trump was our candidate in 2016, but he went against us. And it's like, how much did we push him? I know it was a bad situation there in Las Vegas, the shooting, but at the same time, the NRA didn't come out and be the source of knowledge when it comes to things, that trusted voice. And those are things that we've got to work toward, because if we're just looked at a conservative organization, or we look at just a Republican pseudo organization, then we're going to lose all those people that are liberals on the other side that have an equal right to self-defense. They have an equal right to gun ownership, and their issue with Second Amendment issues are our issues with the Second Amendment, even though we don't see eye to eye politically, and we should be going along saying, if your hair's purple, or you go along and you wear different clothes, or you go to different religions, something else like that, but you are for Second Amendment, then we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you and protest whatever's going on politically. But when it comes to the social issues, we're not going to go along and weigh into those kind of issues, because when it comes to politics, you've got yours, I've got mine, and we're not going to agree 100% on that, but we should be able to agree 100% on the Second Amendment. I
know we disagreed pretty much on bourbon before the show on what's better, wheat versus rye,
and yet somehow you're managing to keep a civil conversation.
So running for the board seat, so you're already on the ballot. So kind of that big hurdle has been cleared. Now comes the election. So when is the election being held?
The election the ballots are going to come out in the February issue of the NRA magazines. That will be hitting people's mailboxes at the end of January. And the one note that I'm very proud of, first of all, I got nominated by the Board of Directors Nominating Committee. So I'm thankful for being nominated that way. But I'm also got nominated from the members. And I'm one of only 3 people that can claim they were dual membered or dual nominated. But I'm the only person running that is not a sitting board member that was dual nominated too. So I did a lot of work, as I said, to get out there and talk to people and see what the attitudes were about the NRA, because Ohio, it's a pretty gun-friendly state overall speaking. Probably not as good as Texas, but pretty good. And that's where I had several gun shows that I could go to, Ohio gun collectors shows, and friends of NRA that were very good eyefuls when it comes to understanding people's attitudes about the NRA. And that's where I went along and was like, this is great for it, because I want to take it back and work with the board of directors and, to realize that, we've got a little bit of an image problem, not just with the public as a whole, but in the gun community too. And if we can improve those, that'll improve our reach and also, the view that firearms have.
The election's coming out in February. For the folks that want to get to know you and some of the work that you do, you host the Firearms Trainers podcast. Could you talk a little bit about that show? What people can expect from it, and what you like to do?
The Firearms Trainer podcast is targeted at instructors, and the thing that we're trying to fill in there is whether you are USCCA range master, post certified, you as an instructor are given a lesson plan to teach, which is good. The thing that they don't teach you in any of those classes is how do you go along and actually market? How do you go along and approach different demographics that aren't your normal demographics? How do you go along and address some of the mental health issues that you see and to educate your students? All these different things that, as I would go along, call it, takes in order to run a successful firearm business. Even if it is just your side gig, you want to have a full toolbox of tools that, whether it's a older citizen or a younger citizen, somebody who has a handicap or not has a handicap, where the resources are. You know how to go along and help somebody achieve the best they can. There's no way in the world that we're going to be able to get somebody who is 85 year old to be able to run around and shoot like John Wick. But at the same time, we should be able to go along and teach that 85-year-old how to be safe with a firearm so that they don't end up shooting themselves or somebody else for it. If we've got a 18-year-old that comes, we need to make sure they understand, they can't be John Wick without a whole lot of training. And at the same time, if they think they're going to go along and shoot all the bad guys, that's not going to work out really good for them either. And that's where you've got to be this voice of reason within the students' heads of really going along and helping them realize what they can do, and physically, and also some of the legal aspects from it. I'm not a lawyer, but go along and educate people about, hey, you got to have a reasonably articulable case in order to draw your gun on somebody in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you are. Now, that's above and beyond whatever the local laws are about, magazine capacity and firearms and different things like that. But those are things that people need to, realize. And I'm right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and literally I can look out my window and see Kentucky. That's how close I am to Kentucky. I'm 15 minutes away from Indiana. Well, that means I've got to be familiar with all three states, because going over to Indiana and say, hey, I'm from Ohio, doesn't change a single thing. And sometimes people are very surprised about that. You mean, Indiana doesn't honor Ohio laws? And it's like, it's Indiana. They've got their own laws. Why would they want to honor Ohio's laws?
We have a similar situation here. Massachusetts has no reciprocity with other states. We don't recognize anybody else's licenses. Yeah. And where Jeff and I are located right now, we're 10 minutes from the Rhode Island border. And that's a whole nother set of laws.
Rhode Island's small enough that you can enter and exit it on accident and not even know.
Yeah.
One of the questions before we wrap up, and I don't want to take up your whole night, one of the things we ask a lot of our guests is, when it comes to firearms, everybody has their own collection. If money was no object, what would be at the top of the bucket list firearms that you'd love to add to the personal collection?
That's a tough one. It kind of depends on the day and what I might use it for. I've always been a very big fan of like the Colt Anacondas. Those are really nice. Ruger's got some fantastic revolvers too. Smith & Wesson, they're 500. That's a beast for it. But also, too, there's some very nice rifles out there. With the Ohio Rifle and Pistol Association, they do a lot of competitions in Ohio. And there are some F-class rifles that are freaking amazing for it, that are $10,000+ for it. Woo. Outside my price range, I can tell you that.
There you go.
But they're shooting at 1,000 yards and putting a dime over. That's how close they're getting.
That's crazy.
And you get some of those. I even, again, depends on what the day is. There's some very nice shotguns out there, over and under shotguns, semi-auto shotguns for it. And I've been fortunate to be able to. I'm not in any need immediately because I've got a decent collection. I would say I got a nice Beretta shotgun. I got a nice Ruger Precision rifle for rifle work, and I've got a Ruger Super Red Hawk for things that the other two don't work for. So that makes it real nice. And on top of it, I've got a Kentucky rifle, which I will note is the only gun I've ever brought home that my wife went along and said, "Ooh, we could hang that on the wall." Everything else goes in the gun safe. That one, she actually said I could hang on the wall.
Oh, there you go.
So that tells you that it's a pretty rifle. And I can say about the Kentucky rifle, it's nice, but damn, those things are heavy and long.
Yeah, but for launching that big of a projectile, they tend to be soft shooting.
Yeah, but can you imagine being Daniel Boone running through the woods after the Indians and everything with something that's 5 foot long?
I was at a shoot up in Pelham, New Hampshire, and this is going back years, but there was a group that brought all sorts of different military firearms across the decades, or across the centuries, really. And yeah, the muskets was probably the most intimidating thing I ever shot. The loading sequence was complicated. I can't imagine doing that under pressure.
When the other guy is doing the same thing, if
20 yards away.
20 yards away.
And, I'd never even really thought about it. The barrel gets hot.
Sure does.
So not only are you shooting it, but now you got to hang on to the hot thing and then pour powder in it. And, but no, that sounds like a fabulous
And
firearm.
one little slip and it goes kaboom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association nearby to Cincinnati down to Versailles, Indiana, and they do a lot of fun stuff down there that you just don't see that many muzzleloaders in one place doing competitions and doing shotgun shooting. They actually do a clay shoot with muzzleloading shotguns. Now think about how slow that's got to be. Double barrel shotguns. Pull, bang, bang. Then now take and reload.
How are you holding the shot together? So I assume you have to put everything, powder. You then have to put a wad in, and then shot, and then another wad.
Yeah.
You put a cardboard disc on top of it.
Oof.
Wow.
That's a lot.
So
that's a lot for the field.
That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, needless to say, their scores aren't necessarily as high as the people running the Beretta, but at the same time, it's fun to see because every time you shoot a muzzleloader, you get a big cloud of smoke and you get that sulfur smell in the air, which is it's a nice smell.
It's cool.
I think it's an acquired taste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, taste is a good way of saying that because you do taste it. Yeah. It hangs there for a while.
Is there anything else you wanted to add before we start to wrap up? The biggest thing is, and I've been telling people this, and it's shocked some people, but my biggest goal in running for the board of directors is to go along and raise the awareness that the NRA has changed for it. I wouldn't be running with the old regime. Doug Hanlon has really come out and shown to be a leader from a president. He's responding to emails personally that are sent to him, which is something that wasn't done previously. If I don't make it onto the board this time, I'm not going to be, I won't say I won't be sad, but I'll have known that I've done some good in raising the awareness of the NRA 2.0 is real, and that the gun owners out there should be supporting the NRA
along with all the other 2A organizations that they supported. Gun Owners of America, Goals, Ohio Rifle and Pistol, Buckeye Firearms, Second Amendment Foundation. We're all doing work in different areas, whether it's a different state or, we're taking things in front of the Supreme Court like the Second Amendment Foundation does. Realize that each one of these groups does things a little differently. Nobody does what the NRA does when it comes to education. Nobody is out there doing it on the scale of supporting youth shooting across America for it. There are groups that do, individual pieces in different states and such, but the NRA is one of those organizations. As I say, it's the 900-pound gorilla in the room that we need around for our 2A rights, and also just for the legacy of making sure that our kids know about it and our kids know about and appreciate their Second Amendment rights for it. And if I can do that through my candidacy run, that will satisfy me more than anything else.
There you go.
Well, right on. So thank you, Rob. Rob Beckman, host of the Firearms Trainer podcast and candidate for the NRA Board of Directors. Again, that vote's coming out in February. So make sure you pay attention to that. Make sure you get your votes in. Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
So let's keep going with the service rifle series. We skipped the last episode, but this time we're up to Springfield 1855 and 1861.
Yeah, so we're basically up to the American Civil War. And really after this point, you start seeing a lot more firearms that resemble what we looked for in modern stuff.
Yeah.
But, as we're moving along in this journey of firearm technology, every piece, every stop has a story with it that reflects not just the technology itself, but of the people and the times that produced it. Now, the Springfield rifles of the mid-19th century, so we're looking at the model 1855 and the model 1861, are like a really good snapshot of that idea. They were born in a time of, tension, social tension, invention, innovation, national transformation. There was a lot that happened over history. I mean, we see like just the big kind of flashpoints, but there's a lot that goes on in the middle ground that probably gets lost. But together, this marked kind of the point where American firearms truly leave the old world behind. So starting with the 1855, this is originally designed by Edward Maynard of the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. So this is a 58 caliber muzzle-loading rifle. It was 56 inches long overall length with a 40-inch barrel and weighed in at a slim and trim 9.25 pounds. Which, hey, listen, I mean, it's still not nothing.
Oh, no.
But, when you're hauling stuff around on long marches, I mean, remember, this is
Hey, there are no aluminum receivers and composite stocks, and this is wood and steel, man.
You had to carry all your stuff around, and ounces equal pounds. And when you're taking pounds off the firearm itself, that's a huge help.
Sure.
But it came from the Springfield Armory right here in Massachusetts, the same place that had been shaping the nation's arsenal really since the Revolutionary War. By the mid 1800s. That world was changing fast. So smoothbore muskets, which was the standard for centuries, had really given way to rifled barrels that imparted that spin on a projectile for accuracy. And that one little change, the twist of the barrel, meant a revolution, not just in the firearms technology, but in how they were employed. So the effective range of these standard issue arms was once measured in like tens of yards, like feet.
Yeah.
Tens of yards.
Yeah. Yep.
But now that distance is being pushed back to ranges of like 200 yards, up to 400 yards. And this is for the albeit somewhat trained, but this is for the standard user.
Yeah. The
that now 200 yards, 400 yards is attainable. And the later 1861 models would be known to reliably hit, a man-sized target out to 500 yards. I mean, that's, 0.3 of a mile.
That has a direct and profound impact on unit tactics, right? You're not going, like we talked about the last couple times, we're not going muzzle to muzzle over 50 yards, in an open field. You're not doing that anymore. The manual of arms changes. So the 1855 Springfield was one of the first American rifles to fully embrace the new rifled concept. It also introduced something called the Maynard tape primer system. Imagine a roll of paper caps. If you were born in the 60s and 70s, you probably had one of these. A roll of paper caps, just like that cap gun, being automatically fed into the firing mechanism every time the hammer fell. The tape primer didn't always play nice with moisture, dirt, cold weather, etc. in the field. Soldiers in the pre-Civil War era found that the tape would misfire, tear, or just outright refuse to ignite. When it worked great. But when it didn't, it was, not much more than a paperweight.
Yeah, when you're, like you said, when you're talking 50 yards, it's like, all right, well, if it stops firing, now you got a big club to go fight with.
Yeah, right.
At 500 yards.
What are you going to do? We'll see you further down the road.
But, it represents the ambition of a country racing towards modernity. The U.S. was industrializing, experimenting, and starting to think of warfare that could be improved with mechanics and science. So the 1855 Springfield isn't just a firearm and a tool in that sense. It's a prototype for thinking about innovation, try, fail, learn, improve, iterate. And that's where the Springfield Model 1861 enters the picture. So, when the Civil War is breaking out in the early 1860s, the U.S. Army suddenly needed a rifle that could be mass-produced, needed to be reliable, and it needed to be accurate. They basically took everything that worked from the 1855, ditched everything that didn't. So out went like the Maynard tape primer, in came the percussion cap. They brought the percussion cap back and just said, listen, this is the better way to do it. And what remained was kind of a sleek, efficient rifle that just became a workhorse for the Union Army.
The Model 1861 fired the famous 58 caliber Minié ball. It gave soldiers accuracy out to several hundred yards, far beyond what smoothbore muskets could do. For the first time, ordinary infantrymen could, in some sense, hit almost any target they could see. It's said that during the Civil War, the Springfield 1861 was so accurate that Confederate soldiers would sometimes mistake Union marksmen for trained sharpshooters. Most of the time, they were just regular guys with a better gun. The Springfield 1861 was so widely admired that the Confederacy tried to copy it. They produced near identical versions in Southern armories, although the quality wasn't quite the same. Imagine fighting a war where both sides are using the same blueprint. That's the Springfield legacy. Even your enemies respect it enough to steal the design.
And another little known fact, so the Springfield rifles were among the first American firearms to be truly standardized. Parts were interchangeable, which, to us sounds obvious now, but back then was fairly groundbreaking. Before that, if something broke, like on your musket, you might as well, just make a new part from scratch or pray that your local gunsmith could fix it. With the Springfield rifles, you could take the trigger from one gun and fit it into another and swap parts and vice versa. And it wasn't just smart engineering. It had to do more with American mass production. And in a way, you could argue that the Springfield 1861 helped shape factories, production lines, and the way America thought about building anything. Like you could draw a straight line from the armory floors in Massachusetts to the assembly lines of Henry Ford. That idea of precision and repeatability could help a nation build and industrialize and advance a lot faster. And that started with things like Springfield right here in Massachusetts. But by the end of the Civil War, over 1 million of these rifles had been produced. And that's a huge number for the time. 1 million in 1860s. And many of them kept serving well into post-war years until they were finally replaced by like the breech-loading Springfield trapdoor. But even as new models came along, that spirit of 1861 kind of stuck around. Like it was a rifle that proved America could innovate and not just copy European designs. We had built in America a little bit.
America.
So what makes the Springfield 1855 and 1861 unique is not just that they fought in like the nation's bloodiest war. It's that they embody the moment when America decided to really merge craftsmanship with technology. It was a leap from handmade to machine made. It kind of made an industry out of art, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. Moving from the musket to the rifle. And if the 1855 was the dream, the 1861 was the reality. And together they became the bridge between old world warfare and the modern age that followed. And that's kind of the real legacy of the Springfield Rifles, not just in the individual battles, but the blueprint they left behind for how America builds, adapts, and pushes forward.
That is going to do it for today. Thanks for listening in. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show, share it with friends, check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/GoalPodcastMA, on YouTube at The Goal Podcast, or on Twitter at Goal Update.
To join Goal, visit goal.org and click the Join Renew button on the top of the homepage.
If you have a topic you think we should cover, if there's something going on in your club or your town, or if you have a question for the mailbag, shoot us an email at goalpodcast@goal.org.
The Goal Podcast is a production of Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Goal, its staff, or affiliates.